It is my pleasure to introduce this morning's speaker, Mr. Jerald Mitchell. He is the Economic Development Director of the Atlanta BeltLine. He plays a critical role in developing and advancing economic development strategy in partnership with Invest Atlanta and to implement the Atlanta BeltLine's mission. Prior to joining Atlanta BeltLine, Jerald served as the Director of Emerging Industry and led the innovation development with the Savannah Economic Development Authority. He's also been in various leadership roles with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, the Coastal Regional Commission, and Comcast. Jerald is a native of Savannah, and he received his BA in Econ from Armstrong Atlantic State University, and his executive MBA in international business from another school in the city, whose beginning is with Georgia, and there's a second part of that. We welcome you anyway, despite that. He is a graduate of the leadership class of Georgia in 2013. In 2014, he was named one of Savannah's Rising Stars by Savannah Magazine. He's a member of the Golden Isles Arts and Humanities Board of Directors, the Leadership Savannah Board of Directors, the Savannah Poverty Reduction Initiative Policy Committee and Work Development Task Force, and the Greater Savannah International Alliance Task Force. It's an honor to host him this morning. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jerald Mitchell.
Thank you. Good morning. So first of all, I'll do a little housekeeping. Thank you, Dean Ayers, Christina, Michael Patrick, and distinguished alumni and guests at UGA. I really appreciate you guys welcoming me this morning. Several people told me that I should wear a gold tie. Several people told me I should wear a red tie, but I decided to go with the BeltLine tie. So, Paul Morris, the CEO of the Atlanta BeltLine, sends his regards, and you get me instead. So hopefully we can get to a point in this presentation where you have a better understanding of the Atlanta BeltLine, and you have a better view of how you can interact with the BeltLine and how we want to interact with the broader community. Again, this isn't just something that is being built for Atlanta. We really look at this as a regional and statewide economic engine. So, and by the way, I want to try to make this as interactive as possible. So I want to do a few slides just to kind of tee up the program, give you some background. But there's a point where it gets really, really detailed, and I would rather answer your questions versus get into that. So again, as to the point that we can make this interactive, I'm happy to do that. So how many people live in the city of Atlanta? Okay, that's pretty good. How many people have used or have been exposed to the Atlanta BeltLine? Okay, that's really good. That's really good. So this is going to be easy, and I think nothing's easy. This is going to be fun. All right, here we go. So just to get you guys oriented to the Atlanta BeltLine, so you're not there. You're actually at the north of that loop. We are completely within the city of Atlanta and inside of Interstate 285, just to give you kind of some bearings. We're in the heart of the Atlanta region. We connect many of Atlanta's cultural landmarks and institutional destinations. And we connect 4 historic rails or railroads. So what is now the Atlanta BeltLine planning area or corridor used to be 4 small railroads. And these railroads disconnected 45 neighborhoods around the city of Atlanta. So we've all heard the phrase over the years, the other side of the railroad tracks. So you had some neighborhoods that were affluent, some areas that were less affluent, and all separated by these 4 rail lines. So it was called the Belt Lines, plural, but in our effort to regain connectivity, we're calling it the BeltLine, singular. So again, this is a map that shows in a little bit more detail the actual Atlanta BeltLine corridor. The green that you see going around, it looks like a pear or looks like a heart or whatever you want to call it. We've heard trapezoid, we've heard, oval, whatever. The green is the actual corridor, and that corridor is the transit and trail piece of or component of the Beltline. Again, it's uniting 45 neighborhoods. It consists of about 20% of the city's landmass and 20% of the city's population. So it's pretty big. If you think about that, that's the size of a lot of B-tier cities. And it's about 6,500 acres in terms of the TAD, or the Tax Allocation District, which is one of our primary sources of funding. So just to give you an overview of the components of our program, this is not your ordinary rails to trails type project. We're responsible for creating 1,300 new acres of green space, 33 miles of urban trails, 5,600 units of affordable workforce housing. And again, I want to make sure we say workforce housing, because what we're talking about is places where teachers and police officers and nurses and firefighters can live. We've gotten to a point where in a lot of neighborhoods and circumstances, those public servants can't afford to live in our own city. So again, we're trying to address that on some basic level. Corridor-wide historic preservation and public art, as well as an arboretum. If you're on the Beltline or around the corridor between the months of September and November, what you see is weird things all over the trail, or what to some people could be considered as weird things, but what it is art displays. Some of them look like windmills, some of them look like stages. It just runs the gamut. And once the project is completed, what we hope to have is the South's largest outdoor public arts exhibition. And we have a partnership with Trees Atlanta, so the Arboretum is a really big component of our program. We're also going to do 22 miles of transit, which will be a streetcar that runs around the Atlanta BeltLine Loop, which is 22 miles, and the trails will be about 33 miles. We're going to do 46 miles of streetscapes. So people think of us as trails and as transit and as parks and green space, but we're also responsible for 46 miles of road that'll lead into the Beltline corridor. 30,000 jobs, that's a responsibility that I'm directly charged with. It's the creation of 30,000 new full-time jobs, permanent jobs, 48,000 one-year construction jobs, and 10 to 20 billion in new private investment. And then, because this is an old rail corridor, we're also responsible for about 1,100 acres of environmental cleanup. If you can imagine that various things were transported and stored along the rail, there is going to be some level of contamination or environmental remediation needs. So we're taking that on as well. So I skipped the other slide because I think this one shows it better, and it's a quicker way of orienting you about our organizational structure. So we are a creation of Invest Atlanta. Invest Atlanta is the city's development authority, and they report to the city of Atlanta. We, as I mentioned earlier, are partially funded by a tax allocation district, which in other states is called a TIF. I think Georgia's the only state that uses the term TAD. TIF is tax increment financing. So that money is collected from property tax increment, and it's passed through from the city to Invest Atlanta and then on to the project. We are the implementation agent for the city of Atlanta for this particular project. In the green box, you see the Atlanta BeltLine Partnership. That is our sister organization. And what they're responsible for is, as you hear about people volunteering around the Beltline, or as you hear about philanthropic contributions to the Atlanta BeltLine, those all flow through the Atlanta BeltLine Partnership because they are a 503C is what they're officially classified as. And they also handle the community and public awareness piece. These are not all of our funding partners or partners by any stretch. But these are some of the public partners that we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge. Again, going from Fulton County, Atlanta Public Schools, Invest Atlanta, the city, the Path Foundation is a really big partner. Trees Atlanta, the Trust for Public Land, the Atlanta Regional Commission, Georgia DOT has been a huge partner because we've needed them to work through some of the easement challenges along the rail corridor. USDA, the Department of Commerce, the Federal Transit Administration, and again, there are numerous partners that are not listed here, but we love them too. So, as the strategy progresses, we're looking at this in a two-pronged fashion. One component is the project component, and that's the infrastructure streams. We've got a team of transit people, people that work on construction of trails, beautification of parks, and planning for streetscapes. And then the other component is the programmatic piece. The programmatic piece is the environmental team, it's the economic development team, it's real estate, it's housing, it's the art. The art and design team that we have as well. So I was talking earlier this morning about how we've got a staff of 40 people, and I hope that explaining those different components sheds light on why we need that many people to do what we're doing. So we're currently in period 1 of the project. We've broken this thing out in terms of 3 phases to complete the project. And that's built out of trails, transit, and parks. The other components we're layering on, and we want to make sure that we're trying to address some component of the project in pretty much every section of the city. That's difficult, but it's something that we have to do because we're receiving those dollars from all parts of the community at the same time. Let's see here. Okay, so this is a little, maybe a little busy, but I think it lays out some of the components in our progress. And if you think about it like a traffic light, you know, the red is things that we're not doing so well. The yellow are things that we're getting there, and the green are things that we're actually, you know, ahead of the curve on right now. So in terms of total investment for the project, we've made about $410 million in expenditures. We have done environmental assessments on about 11.5 miles of the transit corridor. The trail corridor, 26.5 miles, have been assessed and designed. Parkland, we've got 562 acres under control. So that's about halfway, which is good for only a third of the way through the project. Brownfield remediation, we've got 272 acres, so we've got some progress there, but we've got a long way to go in terms of that cleanup. And again, we've got really good relationships right now with EPA and EPD. And just an anecdote, we got an award last year from EPA, and that's a good thing, and people don't get excited about that, but we get excited about it because that's like getting an award from the IRS, right? So from a transit project standpoint, we've completed 0 miles. The streetcar is running downtown from the King Center, shame on me, to the area around Peachtree Center. So we designed that as an agent of the city, but that is not controlled or owned or operated by the Atlanta BeltLine. What we hope the next phase of that streetcar implementation process is moving it or extending it from the King Center over to the BeltLine on the east side. So we're thinking Krog Street, that area. Trail project. So we've got about 6.75 miles designed or delivered, 202 acres of parks. Streetscape projects are at 2.3 miles, so we've got some work to do there. Permanent jobs, again, this is, you know, I've been counting for the last year, but we're at about 4,600 new jobs created. That's about 15% of the goal. Construction jobs, one-year construction jobs, we've actually done a really good job on. Let me rephrase that. The private sector has done a really good job on helping us with that, because a lot of the residential development continued to happen even during the downturn, the economic downturn. And a large amount of that occurred around the East Side Trail and the Atlanta BeltLine. Economic development. So in exchange for our $410 million in public expenditures on infrastructure, we've seen about $2.46 billion in new private development around the Atlanta BeltLine planning area. So that's pretty significant. Again, a long way to go to get to that $10 to $20 billion number, but again, that's pretty significant, especially if you throw in 4 or 5 years of recession. Housing development. So the target is to create 2,800 new units of housing around or 28,000 new units of housing around the Atlanta BeltLine planning area. We're at about 13,000, which is a good number, but where we're lagging is with regard to the affordability piece of this. We want to do 5,600 units of affordable workforce units, and we're at 985. So again, we've got a lot of work to do with that. Now, I'll tell you what the challenge is if you want to know. The biggest challenge with regard to creating affordability is helping developers make these deals pencil. It costs X dollars to build one unit in a multi-unit residential development. And what's happening as the city recovers is the cost of land is getting extremely high. So once your land cost or land price has reached a certain basis, it becomes extremely difficult to add a significant enough subsidy into that particular development deal to make the affordability work. So again, we've got some challenges there, but we're working through that. Let's see. We're going to have a better slide, so forgive me for that. Economic impacts or development activity to date. So to date, like I said, more than 20,100 new construction jobs and 4,600 permanent jobs have been created in the planning area. In the planning area, if we go back to this map, so what you see is gray and you see orange. So the orange, or some of you guys might see pink. Anyway, the orange is the tax allocation district. And what we tried to do when we set up the tax allocation district is carve out all of the residential, single-family residential, so that residents would not be impacted by the cost of the project. So it's mostly being paid for by the business community. There are some residential or single-family residential units in this tax allocation district, but not many. I think about 300. The gray that you see is the planning area. So that gray represents about half mile on each side of the corridor. So it's about a mile wide swath all the way around the BeltLine. So when I say planning area, I'm talking about the gray area there, which represents about 15,000 acres. Okay, so this is a better map. If you're thinking about trails around the BeltLine, this kind of shows where we are. If you look at the yellow is the area between Sweetwater Brewing and Ansley Mall. And that area is, we currently own it, but that area is what we call hiking trail. It's cleared, it's usable, but it's not a paved trail or street. And that's another thing. When you think about trail, think about it as a street, because we're building this thing as a street. It's not like your ordinary sidewalk. If you look at the green on the east, that area is the East Side Trail. So that's from Ponce City Market all the way down to Krog Street, or Krog and Irwin, that area. If you look at the orange just below the green, that will be what we call the East Side Trail extension. So we're going to move, or we're going to build from that Krog Street area down to Memorial Drive. If you're familiar with a restaurant called H. Harper Station, right at Memorial and Bill Kennedy, we're going to come out right there. So If you look to the southwest, there's an area there that's in orange, right? Okay, that area is currently under construction. We started that in January. We did a groundbreaking for that last November. And this area is going to see basically a $43 million investment in build out for the trail and preparation for the transit corridor. And that's really significant because if you think about Southwest Atlanta at the West End and at Capitol View and Oakland City and at Adair Park, those areas have been extremely disinvested for the last, 30, 40 years. So for them to see a $40 million investment going in is pretty big. And what we're starting to see are more tire kickers from a development standpoint that are looking at the area. So hopefully this really is the beginning of something extraordinary for Southwest Atlanta. So the pink area that you see on the south, that area is currently owned by CSX. We are negotiating with CSX. It's abandoned. They had one customer on that line. That customer was Lafarge, and there was a delivery once a week to what we call the sand plant, because it was a concrete mixing plant that used sand and gravel and whatever else. But at any rate, that plant has been sold, so there are no more trains going along that pink area. So we're negotiating to acquire that. We don't know how long that's going to take, but once we get that done, it'll take about 24 months to build out the trail there. If you look at the blue areas have been designed, and we're basically planning that stuff. What we've got on the northwest is really interesting because those areas are also owned by CSX. The challenge is that area is actually a very active rail line. So what we're trying to get there is an easement to the east of CSX so that we'll have safe passage for streetcar and trail. And in some instances, the trail will come off corridors. So meaning, we'll have the streetcar run along next to the train, but you'll have the trail component go on another street or something like that. That's far enough away from anything dangerous. So told you I had a better map. And there is a piece up in Collier Hills that is already built. If you look up at the north in the green, so that piece is already built, and it was built by the private sector. The private sector in partnership with the Path Foundation built that out. So this is a green space map. We will have more green space. Give you an example. Is anybody familiar with the Bellwood Quarry? Okay, so very good. We got a couple of people. So I'll try to show you. So this is Waterworks over in West Midtown, right here. So the Bellwood Quarry is about right here. Well, no, it's here. So what's happening there is right now the interim use for that quarry is for the film industry. If you watch The Fast and the Furious, or if you watched Hunger Games, or if you watch The Walking Dead, or any of those shows, when you see the abandoned areas that look wooded, but there's rocks and stuff like that, that's the Bellwood Quarry in the city of Atlanta. And if we can ever get you guys on a tour over there, you'll see that, first of all, it's beautiful. You'll ask yourself if you're still in Atlanta, and then you'll, I think, make some connectivity to what we're talking about. But what we hope that's going to happen here, there's 300 acres around the quarry that we currently own, or the city of Atlanta currently owns. It's going to be built out as a park. And to put that in perspective, that park is going to be 330 acres, which is 100 acres larger than Piedmont Park. So it will be Atlanta's largest park when it's built out. The quarry will be filled with water. It has a capacity to hold about 2 billion gallons of water, which will take the city of Atlanta's backup drinking water supply to 30 days. We currently estimate that it's about 7. So it'll be a significant infrastructure improvement for the community. Return on investment on the East Side Trail. So we've seen about $13 million post-project cost for design and construction. We got a $5 million contribution from private donors, and we have seen in exchange for that $860 million and new private development with within half a mile of the trail. So I'm going to show you some pictures that'll put that in context, we hope. So does anybody recognize that building? This is what is now Ponce City Market. That park, or that area, used to flood. It was pretty bad. There was no development around it because the entire area flooded. The city of Atlanta was going to spend $40 million doing a water improvement project, or a stormwater improvement project. We were able to go in, save the city $15 million, building something that would alleviate the stormwater and flood issues. So that's what it looks like today. And if we could do a 360 on Google Earth or something like that, you would basically see that there's residential development almost 360 degrees around in terms of the view. There's another piece of project that's on the corner of North and Angier that we have an ownership stake in. We're currently negotiating for that piece of property. It's called the Masquerade. You might have read about that one, but we're currently negotiating with a developer to turn that into a mixed-use development as well. Oh, and we left one out. So we think Google is going into that Ponce City Market building as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. So there are more slides. But what I want to do at this point, before we get into there's, like I said, a lot more detail, and it could be for some people like watching paint dry. I don't want to do that to you this early in the morning. So if there are questions, we can go through them, and if not, then I will get into more of the detail. Yes, sir.
We have a microphone for questions. You'll wait until microphone.
Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, I was waiting for the microphone to get back to him.
Yeah, just wondering what the timing was for the Bellwood Quarry.
So that's a good question. We own the acreage at this point. What has been proposed is using some of the excess permits from the Chattahoochee that the state has to draw from the Chattahoochee to fill the quarry, and then for us, in terms of actually building out the quarry, it's a matter of fundraising. It's how quickly we can raise the dollars to get it done. Right now, it is a period 3 project, which would mean that this would come online at the end of the Beltline project, which is 2030. But again, depending on how those philanthropic or foundation or corporate dollars or grant dollars, depending on how those dollars come in, it could change the timing. So we hope it's sooner rather than later, because I think that's going to be an interesting component. And I'll tell you, sincerely, one of the most difficult challenges for us in terms of our entire geography is going to be the area to the west between Joseph E. Boone and Donald Lee Hollowell, to the dead west of the Beltline. It's one of the most distressed or disadvantaged areas that we have to redevelop and revitalize. If you have ever driven there or taken a tour, so I'll give you a number. I mean, the vacancy rate in that neighborhood is 40%. So if you drive down a block that has 10 houses on it, 4 of those 10 houses are going to be empty, boarded up, whatever. On the corner of Boone, or at Boone, and I think it's Mason Turner, where it intersects the Beltline, there are several multifamily developments that are all empty. They have no windows. They have no roofs. I mean, it's a really interesting site. So what we believe is that, and this is another, I think, interesting fact. Is everybody familiar with West Midtown? So West Midtown is actually in the Beltline planning area. It's a part of the Beltline. The Beltline actually runs behind JCT Kitchen and White Provisions. But what we think is that if we can get the quarry done, if we can put in some neighborhood stabilization measures in that Boone and Hollowell area, and if we can start to see some growth happen because of the quarry, that it'll have a pretty interesting impact, because we think that there's also going to be some momentum coming from the south because of the Southwest Trail. So if we can, if we can make those two nodes start to pop and then see some just organic growth in toward those really distressed areas, we think that we can see some change before the end of the project. So, yes, sir. She's coming with the microphone for you.
Can you talk a little bit more about the BeltLine public transit connections, either with MARTA or other systems?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We do not know who's going to manage or operate. We assume it's going to be MARTA. We're going to design it, build it, and whatever the city wants to do, that's a decision that's above or beyond us. But we are looking at true integration, interactivity with MARTA. This map shows just some of the environmental assessment areas. It shows the route. So from a BeltLine standpoint, we're going to basically run this loop, this entire loop. This dark blue is already built. We have gotten through most of the environmental assessment piece for this dark blue piece of the corridor, and this is the East Side Trail that's already built, minus transit. And we're going to start on some of these other phases. But again, as you can see here, this red is MARTA. So MARTA actually does intersect the BeltLine at Boone, at Bankhead. We've got a MARTA station here at the West End. There's another one here at Oakland City. There's one here at, I think this is King Memorial, and this one is Inman. And I know that looks like a long distance, but those are actually pretty short walks. And then, did I say Lindbergh? We got another one here at Lindbergh. And yes, the BeltLine does go up to Lindbergh. And there's, we hope, some other infill train station opportunities as well. Let's see. I had another map, but apparently it didn't make it into this presentation. But we're trying to essentially work with the different communities and the different transit and public entities to further establish or refine the routes. We're not only refining the routes, we're trying to make sure that we understand where the best places are to have the train stations. So again, that's a pretty lengthy process. We actually just hired a new transit or transportation director who actually set up the system in Phoenix, Arizona. So his name is Ben Limmer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just right up the road, we have Mountain Way Common that's being built. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of wondering about the relationship between the BeltLine and the Mountain Way Common, and if there are any other kind of independent projects like that that you guys are working on.
Yeah, so what we do, what we're trying to do is make it easy for developers and businesses, and when I say developers, I mean industrial, primarily light industrial, commercial and residential developers and businesses. We're trying to make it easier to do business by tackling the tough infrastructure challenges or needs. One of the things we've done to move down that path is we've established what we call a design review committee. For anybody in the development business, you know that just because you hire an architect and because you do some due diligence doesn't mean that you're going to get your product or project entitled and approved and zoned and all that other stuff. So what our design review committee does, what we'd like to encourage is that developers and others approach us as early on in the project as they possibly can, because what we're willing to do is give feedback about compatibility with the BeltLine overlay. And the overlay has basically been approved and accepted by the City of Atlanta's City Council. So essentially what it does is sets up guardrails or parameters for development or construction in the various parts of the Beltline planning area. And we've divided that into 10 different areas, what we call sub-areas. And we worked with the neighborhood associations and the NPUs in all of those 10 areas to understand what was and wasn't acceptable. And then we layered onto that some design and professional expertise to establish what is the master plan or the Beltline overlay. So again, the way we'd like to see that work is as people have new developments or have the desire to purchase or go through that process, we'd like to see those developers reach out to us. It's no cost, believe it or not. You know, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It won't cost you anything. We're happy to have informal meetings just to kind of talk about, you know, whether or not you can get that 6-story or whatever the case might be. And obviously, in terms of making the pro forma work, having a 6-story versus a 4-story building means a lot, right? So I hope that answered your question. Others?
I know one of the plans further out, it's right here.
Oh, got it. You're hidden.
Is a spur to the Westview Cemetery area.
Yes.
Is there any plans to kind of make the Westview Abbey as a destination? I mean, that's just a gorgeous piece of architecture over there.
You know, that's actually a really, really good question. As we approach, and just for anybody that's interested, this is the Westview Cemetery. It's a gorgeous historic cemetery on the west side of town, and we've actually got some trail that was built by the Path Foundation that goes from the Beltline to the Westview Cemetery. In terms of making it a destination, that's actually very appealing. We don't have specific plans to do it. But what we look at, or what we've been talking about internally in terms of success for the West Side Trail, we know it's not going to look like the East Side Trail. We know that because of the density of multifamily residential and commercial that's happening on the East Side, we're going to see something different on the West Side. Because on the West Side, what you've got is very dense single-family residential. So what we're trying to grapple with, or what we're grappling with or trying to understand is what success looks like. And we want to have a defined beginning, middle, and end for the West Side Trail. And that has come up, but we don't have specific plans to do it. But hopefully we will soon.
Can you talk a little bit about how the Congress's recent passage of the allowal of public and private partnership is going to affect development from a timeline perspective? I would assume it's going to speed things up, but then also give examples of what that would look like and where that might take place.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, we recently gained support from the state's General Assembly, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, to pass P3, or public-private partnership legislation, to help us fund the transit portion of the project. The reality is we don't have a specific plan or strategy for leveraging it yet. That is something that we will do shortly, but that could look like a few different things. Now, one of the things that we want to make sure that we maintain is, for lack of a better way to put it, control. We want to make sure that the Beltline, the transit or the streetcar that runs around the Beltline is still doing a public good. And if we lose control of that, we could lose control of that being a public thing that helps with mobility from point to point. But with that being stated, again, it could look like, scenarios that help us build out the transit corridor, but also help the private party identify TOD locations, which is transit-oriented development, So if you've ever been to New York or DC or other cities, when you get off at a train stop, what you generally see are either residential, multifamily residential developments that are at the train stop, which actually adds value from a land ownership standpoint. Or you see, shops and stores and things of that nature. If you're in the subway in New York, you get off the train and there's like all these kiosks where people are selling you stuff. It's a commercial area, but those are some of the immediate things that I think could be in the realm of possibility. But we just really don't know what a template looks like in terms of that agreement. We're glad that we have the ability to start to structure something. But again, I wouldn't be being honest if I told you we had that part figured out.
Jerald, where all do you get to tell this story? I mean, do you work with the Metro Chamber or the Economic Development Commission or these other organizations which, if you pick the paper up, seem to have had a pretty nice track record here as of late with Mercedes and Porsche and all the things that we read about. But gosh, it's just such a compelling piece of Atlanta, the vision, its future.
Yeah.
Do you guys work together to make that a part of the narrative?
We do. So one of the benefits that we've got, especially from a Metro Chamber standpoint, is that Brian McGowan, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the Metro Chamber, used to be the CEO at Invest Atlanta. So he gets it. He understands every project. He understands every dollar that we spend. We've been working to build relationships, stronger relationships with state entities. Again, GDOT has been very, very instrumental. Being able to start to have the conversations with the Georgia Department of Economic Development has been really, really big for us. Going to different conferences and other locations to tell the story, and not only tell the story, but learn from others has been big. Again, if this were easy, it would be done, and these neighborhoods would be revitalized and thriving. So again, we've got a lot to learn. We've got, I think, a really good record for delivering, especially if we look at the East Side Trail. But again, we're trying to tell the story to anybody that'll listen. And we want to be, again, forthcoming and honest about the things that we haven't accomplished yet, but should have accomplished. But we also want to say, you know what, we're also doing pretty good. Generally speaking, we're doing pretty good at this. So thank you for that question. That's important.
Yeah, it strikes me that there's usually a fairly linear on or off. You're either doing maintenance or pouring pavement, and what you're doing is transformation and revitalization. It's very sophisticated.
Yep.
And you're painting a great possibility, but the flip of that is we're kind of like the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? It gets hotter and So, and think about the bridge that fell. I told you I just moved from D.C. Right on the area where I used to commute to work. How are you flipping that conversation to say, around this belt line, here's all the risks that are of the crumbling infrastructure?
Yeah.
How do you tell? Unfortunately, you do have to sometimes tell the story that way.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and I'll give you, some very recent examples of that. So I mentioned that we're building the West Side Trail, which is going from Washington Park south to the old State Farmers Market on Murphy Avenue. And we are having reports of residents, talking about or letting us know about, settling, things of that nature related to noise and vibration. So, we're trying to have those conversations where damage occurs. We're trying to make sure that we help those residents address those things. In that particular scenario, and I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this or not, but we've got a partnership with Federal Home Loan Bank, and what we're hoping with it's an elderly resident that has some concerns about settling. We think some of the settling and foundation challenges might have been pre-existing, but the reality is that it's an opportunity to have the conversation about how we can help an elderly member of the community do very important, very necessary repairs to their house or to their home that they might not have otherwise been able to afford. We've got a relationship, you may have heard this promoted, we've got a current relationship with Federal Home Loan Bank where we're doing two things. We're doing owner-occupied rehab for qualifying residents, and we're also doing down payment assistance for people in qualifying income ranges to help them become first-time or second-time homeowners. So the reality is we're not going to run from it. When those things happen, we're going to have conversations. We're going to do the due diligence to figure out if it's our fault or not, and try to do the right thing by the community, because the Beltline at the end of the day is not ours. It belongs to the community. So,
I have a question.
yes.
What kind of things can the Beltline do to assist developers that might be able to build affordable housing in the Beltline areas, like financing or different things like that?
So the good and bad news is that we have an affordable, or the good news is that we have an affordable housing trust fund. The bad news is that we have an affordable housing trust fund that is empty. And so essentially what's happened is when the first bond issue occurred, a portion of the bond the increment was diverted into a affordable housing trust fund, and that trust fund was leveraged to provide subsidy for building affordable units. It had $9 million in it, and those $9 million have all been committed. So we don't know how we're going to recapitalize the fund without another bond issue. Now, independent of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we have internally at the Beltline, what we're trying to work through or leverage is partnerships. So I mentioned the Department of Community Affairs earlier. That's huge because one of the things that we're willing to work with developers on is the process of obtaining the 4% low-income housing tax credits and the 9% low-income housing tax credits. So, again, we're trying to be creative about what ways we can generate revenue, to be frank, to subsidize or to provide support for developers that are willing to do some component of affordability in their market rate development going forward.
I don't know how to ask the question, and it's probably inappropriate, but the gentleman from Washington and the other lady really, I hate to even mention the word, but the homelessness problem in Atlanta and the crime rate and what you, and earlier this year when the legislature was in session, I heard, I don't know whether it's true or not, but they could care less about Atlanta's problems. And I understand that Atlanta City is really not responsible in their charter to take care. It's a county situation, and I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, so crime and homelessness, those are, two really big topics. And, we encounter it as we work through various parts of the Atlanta BeltLine planning area. I think, in being candid, the best partner we have in addressing any of those challenges are the not-for-profit community and the City of Atlanta's housing department. Again, it is a challenge. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we can steer people into workforce training programs, that we're trying to, provide opportunities where people not only can get the high-end technology jobs, but those people can also move into, jobs at distribution centers or construction jobs. We talked about the 20,100 one-year construction jobs. That's not just in constructing the Atlanta BeltLine, that's also in constructing all these different developments around the planning area. So again, we've got training programs or partners in training programs with the Westside Works and SEFCA, which is, I think, the Construction Education Foundation of Georgia. So again, it's trying to make sure that we plug people into those scenarios. And then we've got another problem that we haven't even, touched the surface on, and that's the mental health issue or scenario that's related to a lot of the homelessness. But again, those aren't issues that we are specifically set up to deal with, but they're things that we encounter, and we have to be creative in terms of reaching out to partners to try to move people into some of those pipelines that can help. From a crime standpoint, there are a couple of things that I think kind of go along with us as a sidecar. Those things being, one, we've got a grant a few years ago to establish what we call the BeltLine Path Force. And it's a police force. It is a division of the Atlanta Police Department that is specifically responsible for security of the Atlanta BeltLine in the planning area. So they go about a half mile out, and they go even to the areas of the BeltLine that aren't built yet. So we're doing that from a security standpoint. We're implementing cameras around the entire loop as we build, of course. So those are big from a safety standpoint. The other piece of this is looking at streetscapes, clean, safe, beautiful. Facade improvement grants. We're trying to develop partnerships and funding so that we can help areas that are blighted, address some of those things as well. So again, those are really, first of all, thank you. Those are good questions that don't often get asked. Unfortunately, we don't have specific initiatives to deal with those, but we are trying to handle that as we come across it through working with partners. Yes, sir.
So this is kind of a long-winded question, but obviously on the east side is where you've really seen the progress and you've seen completed action. And this specifically in the area of, new residences, new condos, especially in my age group, the millennials.
Mm-hmm.
So in those areas, there's been gentrification, and obviously from a private infrastructure standpoint, it's been fantastic from an ROI perspective.
Yep.
How do you continue the balance of this next part, which in the Krog Street Memorial, which is the next really hopping area of Atlanta, maintaining, okay, we want to continue that great ROI, but at the same point, we be cognizant of those residents that have been there for 50 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And we are actively trying to address the G word and dislocation or displacement rather. We are working with the Land Trust Collaborative. We're looking at scenarios where vacant or for sale or abandoned properties can be land banked, so that at future dates we can partner with the right entities to build in or to build back in some of the affordability. One of the bigger challenges that we're having with regard to gentrification and displacement is, again, people want to see that affordability, but they don't want to see it in the South. If you talk to residents in the South or south of 20, what they would tell you is that they don't want more affordable housing built in their neighborhoods. They want to see their current values appreciate. So that's kind of the challenge. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about making the deals pencil, making the deals make sense. And if the land basis, north of I-20, the biggest challenge that we've got is that the land basis is already extremely high. So the only way to really get in the game is if we're able to get, partnership or land at just a price that is, I think, what most of us in this room would call unrealistic. So again, it's interesting because, just to give you an example, if you look at the Lindbergh area, South Buckhead, an acre of land could cost somewhere around $1.5 million for an acre. And you can look at the southernmost point of the Beltline, and you could probably get an acre of land for $60,000 or $70,000. So again, and this is really not, from a mileage standpoint, a huge geography. From north to south, we're talking 6 miles north to south, and to have a swing of, almost $1 million swing, it's pretty impressive. Impressive, good or bad, depending on how you look at it. So, other questions?
I'll be real brief. You mentioned the trust fund, and it was $9 million at bond issue. I know that that money probably went to a lot of different things.
It did.
But in terms of the housing issue, which seems to be something you're behind on and a challenge. How far do those dollars go from a housing perspective? What's the bang for your buck there?
Well, honestly, the bang for the buck is off. It's deficient, to be candid. For $9 million, what we got is effectively 980 units of affordable housing. That's not good enough. 100,000 a unit is basically what the subsidy would have been, and that's again that's insane. So again, we think that a big part of this is that we need to figure out other ways to address subsidy and deals. So in terms of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, those dollars are backloaded in the deal. And we know that from a developer's standpoint, the best way that we can support the deal is by figuring out how to provide some of the top loss or getting into the deal as early in the process as possible. And that also, if we're able to go to the table earlier in the process of building the capital stack and addressing the deal, it gives us, I think, more negotiating leverage to ask for more units of affordability for those dollars. So yeah, I mean, good question. We've got work to do there.
Yes, I just wanted to see if tours are available.
Yes, sir, they are. The Atlanta BeltLine Partnership, our sister organization, does tours every Friday and Saturday. Those tours are free, and it is a 3-hour tour. It is, literally.
Are you the skipper or Gil?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a good tour. It shows you the good, it shows you the bad, I think, but when you come away from it, what you really get is perspective about the true opportunity that exists in the city of Atlanta. So if you go to our website, beltline.org/tour, you can sign up for those tours. We haven't had a problem booking those out. So the conversations have been mentioned, or it's been mentioned that we should expand the offering, but right now it's only not Thursdays, only Fridays and Saturdays. So please, again, if you haven't been, please do that. Reserve a spot and go take a look. It's really fascinating. Yes.
So just wanted to ask, obviously from a donation perspective, that's one way we can help. How else can we help?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways. So yes, the donation piece is big from a personal or individual standpoint. If you want to, contribute $35 or $50 or $100 or whatever the case might be, we would absolutely be appreciative of that. And those dollars would go to construction of more trail. The other ways to get involved are to volunteer. We've got numerous health initiatives in conjunction with Piedmont Hospital. We do walks with docs. We do yoga out on the Beltline. There are lots of different things that we do. So again, volunteering is a good way. The other ways that you can help are, one, when you're out around the Beltline, and I would be derelict in my duty as the Economic Development Director if I didn't say this, but stop at some of the restaurants and shops and spend money. The other thing that I would say is encourage companies that are growing, companies that are growing, encourage them to take a look at locating around the Beltline. We've got some, I think, interesting, safe, and unique opportunities for companies that are in growth mode to expand along the Beltline. We've got cases where we think that that's made a big difference. And this is just a retail or a restaurant example of it. But if you look at, if you go to our website, we've got business testimonials, and this month's testimonial is Kevin Rathman. And he will tell you from a business standpoint how opening his business to the Beltline has made a big difference in their operation. Because it was an abandoned rail, nobody's back door or front door was facing what is now the Beltline. All the doors face the streets. And now, if you look at Lady Bird and you look at, Rathman's and Paris on Ponce and some of the other places. What you see is the businesses are starting to open up toward the back, or what is now the front. So again, it's that piece of it, because not only is that going to help those businesses, but it's going to help some of these communities that have suffered disinvestment to begin to make that turn. Great example, again, I can't speak enough about it. It's our best example to date, but it's that historic Fourth Ward Park behind Ponce City Market. 5 years ago, I don't know that any of you would have ridden a bike back there, would you? But today, there's cyclists, there are people walking their dogs, people playing in the splash pad or park with their kids. All those different things are happening now. It's thriving, and it's thriving because of one, people willing to take a little bit of risk. Two, because the community supported it. So again, there are a lot of ways to get engaged, but those are the things that come to mind most prominently. Other questions? Trying to find a good picture, or that picture again. Yeah, that's now a park, a wonderful park. And again, it used to be it used to be pretty bad. You'd find drug paraphernalia, just all types of bad things right there. So, other questions? I'm here all day. No, again, I want to thank you all for welcoming this yellow jacket that's actually about to marry a bulldog this morning. And if there are if there are questions about the Beltline or economic development in general that I can help any of you guys address, don't hesitate to reach out. My email address is jmitchell@atlbeltline.org. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jerald. We're going to give you two presents. First here is a sculpture by Loretta Evie to mark your presentation today. It is red and black.
It's beautiful.
And it's honor, obviously, of your
Thank you.
wise choice and bride.
Thank you.
And more importantly, we're going to place a brick in our new business campus.
Thank
that's already under construction. Phase 2 hopefully will begin this fall. And if any of you would like a brick of your own, we also have these you can purchase for $250.
Thank you so
very much.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate the information that you shared today.
And by the way, I applied to Terry first.
Very good. Very good.